Well, there you go. It's a warm welcome to our co-host from the UK. It's Priti, Pauline, and her guest. And we've been talking off air, and it's just awesome. I found another brother from a different mother, and I think we're going to be in for a great show tonight. So, it's a great show in the morning for you guys in the UK. So, good morning to you both.
Good morning, Jeff. Great day to you, and good night too soon.
That's right. So, Pauline, you want to take it away, mate?
Yes, I'd like to say hello and welcome to Hans Günther. Hans and I have known each other for quite a few years, but from a distance, really. And it was only relatively recently, during the COVID time, that we really actually physically met each other. He had a lot to do with the Life Improvement Centre, very close to me. So his name was mentioned many, many times. And then during COVID, about half an hour before a big meeting started, I got a phone call to say, "Are you coming to the meeting?" And I went, "What meeting?" So in half an hour's time, I wandered down to Forest Row, and there he was. So we actually met. I can tell you precisely. It was the day before my dad's birthday, on the 24th of March, 2010. Can't remember, to be honest. It was the COVID time, whatever the year number was. And then from there, we've kept in touch through various different organizations, from Emerson College and through mutual friends, and the moving of Emerson College's herb garden from it was from Emerson up to Hoadley Hill. Marvelous feat of accomplishment there. And then more recently, I phoned him to find out if there was any possibility of saving my quince tree, which had been whipped up by the winds and fallen to a very acute angle. And lo, he came to the rescue. He rescued my mother's quince tree, and I'm forever grateful. And the crop has been amazing. And from there, we got talking. And of course, he knew Michelangelo and has had some work done with Michelangelo. And I suggested to him, would you like to come and talk about your biodynamic world, the university that he's set up, the Wholistic Living University? And no, here he is. So I would like to say thank you very much for agreeing to being here. Thank you very much for everything that you've done for my mother's quince, and we wait to see how that will finally, if there'll be more crops next year. Part of the reason the quince fell down was because we've had such a huge bumper crop, and the weight of the fruits were so heavy it leaned the poor thing over. But here we are now with 3 props and some supports that he dug in and nurtured the soil. And I wanted to ask, would you tell us all about how you're nurturing the soil all around the world?
Well, thank you so much, Priti Pauline, for introducing me. And it's a delight. It's exciting to be here, a new platform, and meet you, Jeffrey, brother in the creation of Manifesting Dreams. Beautiful work you're doing. So delighted to getting to know you. And Pauline, I know for a long time, as she said. And the 3 props around the tree are probably a little bit of an analogy for what I really always felt I was bringing to the world, even from early on in childhood, because I was brought up by 2 parents who were refugees from Hungary under the Soviet rulership at the time after the Second World War. And because they were German origin, my father, mixed Hungarian, Mongolian kind of tribal guy who never lost his spirit, even he was shipped to Germany, always in good spirits. He always taught me how to be thinking outside the box, and taught me all the traits that possibly you could learn from working with the hard substance of the earth, with bricks, to wood and also work with the elements and be out in nature. And I think the first thing I really learned from him, more so than from our mother, who was a stout Catholic, who sent us to church, was that his temple was his body. He was fully embodied, and the other temple that he worshipped was nature. And he would take me there and introduce me in very subtle ways to all the different ways of relating to nature through the seasons, which was just a huge, huge, grateful experience that I can't thank him enough. 2 days ago would have been his birthday if he would be still around. So in honor of my dad and my mother, who's a spring girl, I want to just thank them here also publicly, because I just realized how much our ancestors and our forefathers and our parents have actually nourished us. So I'm full with that, and I want to really encourage everybody to honor that also, because as part of the healing of the earth that I felt called upon later in my life, it's really important that we heal our relationships with our ancestors and also of Mother Earth and Father Cosmos. So that's just a short introduction there.
So can you tell us some more about your relation to Earth and how you relate to her?
Absolutely. And, you know, when you say Earth, my consciousness was always bigger than just to Mother Earth. As I mentioned, Father Heaven or Father Sky or Cosmos or whatever you want to call it, the word father or padre from the old Latin sort of origin, pattern, the patterning, the archetypical world that comes from the cosmos was really widely open to me when I was 6 years of age. Because when I was that young, I was actually closer to heaven, because even to this day, I find it really hard to incarnate in my body and be really incorporated fully 100%. And I bang myself everywhere and, you know, have a lot of breakages of bones and falling off ladders when I do gardening and pruning and stuff. It's really hard for me to be physically really here on Mother Earth and embracing her fully in my body. Also my sacred feminine in that sense. But Father Cosmos opened up when I was 6, because I saw the heaven and the stars at that time as living beings, as gigantic, humongous living beings, of which we only could see the dots of light that they emanated from their light body. And I tried to discuss this with my best friend. Lo and behold, he didn't understand the word. And I don't know even what I was talking about, because God knows where it came from. And then, of course, with having very conventional parents, former farmer stock, very pragmatic, you know, you don't talk about stuff like that. So I became very earthbound, you might say, motherbound also, in the sense my mother was a very strong character. And so I connected with the earth in that way. And also nature around where I lived was just a beautiful green fields and Schrebergarten allotments, as we call them here in England, and forest, or woodlands that I should say, where we used to hang out and get to know nature. And it was really a privilege of growing up in an area where there was just green fields, orchards, and a nursery for Stuttgart city parks and things. And I happened to move there into these green fields, into a first 4-story block of buildings that eventually became 15,000 people suburb for a lot of the refugees after the Second World War in the late 50s, 60s, where people then were able to start living sort of semi-green lives out in a very well-landscaped suburban environment, was specifically designed by a very famous French architect who tried to create green space and high buildings. And when I went back there 30 years later, you couldn't see the high-rise buildings for all the trees in the parks and the greenery that was created in this very integrated way of transforming a green field into a suburb. So I think in those days, I got a really strong impulse of how nature could be transformed and cultured and civilized in a way that's respective to the green side and the green space. So people have both living in close vicinity to each other to create strong economies, and then also respecting the environment and the ecology that's around it. So that was like a first experience. And maybe even further back was really my dad taking me to a city park every day, where I took out my dog on wheels. I didn't have a proper dog because dogs are dirty, and cats, you don't want to have them in the house in Germany, particularly with a very clean mum and hygienic mum. So I was taken out always with my dad out into nature where we could get dirty, and really be in the mud and just literally like roll in the mud, He was that kind of guy. So a big contrast that I experienced, a very intellectual and yet very heartfelt upbringing. And I think it really fused later. After my sports career, when I was 12, I became a swimmer and then a water polo player. 15, I was a swim coach, and then professional coach at 17, lifeguard at 17. So my first career was really into sports, and I thought I would become a teacher of physical ed and English. And that led me to come to England and get to know about Emerson College, where literally in a year, my being was turned inside out. And I think there the heavens opened up again. The repatterning, the reshaping, the rejuvenating of all the skills that my dad couldn't give me and my mom, they were able to, through the arts, artisanship, the gardens, the studies, the sacred movement experiences, and so much more, to inspire me to follow my inclination that I felt when I was 10 and 17, where I had a very great breakthrough, because when I was 10, was convinced I would have to go to America. And that was North America, because of my love of the Native Americans, or the First Nation tribes, as we call them now. And to find my squaw, if anybody knows what squaw means, is I saw the picture of my future woman that I would be with at 10 years of age, and mistook my aunt, actually, sadly, for that woman, not knowing I had to go to America. And I got really jealous when she got married. That's me. As a little kid, sulking when she got married. Anyway, joking aside, so 17, another great breakthrough, when I had a download. I had to go and work with the Mayan Indians. So Central America, well, some people say it's North America, some say it's Central America, Mexican, Guatemaltecan, Belize area, El Salvador, and so on. It came onto my radar at 17 years of age. And also what came in the radar was the limited resources that the Club of Rome announced, with the Limits to Growth, if anybody remembers that book, where we were already manipulated to think that everything's limited, we should live in poverty, and by the year 2000, we would run out of oil and resources. Well, guess what? We're harvesting more oil than ever before, and it's already 2025. Good news for us. Not for those who try to target the carbon footprint, but there we go. I have a different opinion about all this. So 17, breakthrough, and then I was like, wow, there's so much injustice in the world. I've got everything I want from my parents. I've got everything I need in this society where I grew up. Even it was post-war, and there was a great boom in the 60s, and technology started coming into the picture. I had all the latest gadgets, the DJing, created my own loudspeakers, and the technology side of things. I was really into that, and my parents thought I would become a technical designer or engineer or whatever. But far from that, when I came to England, I fell in love with nature once more, and with the fact that we can actually become custodians to nature, conscious carers, nourishers for nature, and even men with their sacred feminine become nurturers, not just women, and learn that capacity to embrace nature and embellish nature and make more of it than she is herself already. Just like our own nature, if we were street kids or left to our own devices and not learning skills and cultural skills and any of the amazing skills through arts and artisanship and the trades and what have you, I mean, how poor would the world be in terms of architecture and cultural life, music, all these expressions that we create? They're based on our inner nature, but there's a higher being in us that creates all that out of that basis that are the three kingdoms of nature. And we can do that within and we can do it without. And that's my real focus in my life, has been to bring those two worlds together, to learn to understand them and honor them and nurture them. So overcome the injustices of inequality, of us taking everything from tropical countries and them being left with destroyed landscapes from mining and what have you. And so I really decided I wanted to become an agent for humanitarian aid work and give back at a very early age, because of what I felt deep within viscerally, what my parents had lost, which were their farms and their livelihood and their roots. And I lost my roots. So I help people to find their roots. And I had to uproot myself all my life, for now almost 50 years to do that, to help people. And now I'm like here, well rooted in Sussex in the southeast of England, the last 9 years. And we're going to create a center of excellency based on the Wholistic Living University, where we can train trainers and then multiply. And I have to be a little bit more settled, I think, and rooted myself, because I uprooted myself. I lived in over 70 places in my adult life after the age of 18, just to do my work and help people and learn myself. It was partly also to learn new skill sets and new cultures, new languages, and what have you. So that's a bit the background to how I came to work with integrated rural development. And the basis of that work was actually biodynamic agriculture and anthroposophical wisdom that was nourishing me from the background.
Wow.
So that in a nutshell.
That's a pretty big nutshell. Thank you very much, Hans.
That's why my last name is called Kern. Kern is the core, is the nut, is the seed for the new things. Johnny Appleseed.
Well, that's a beautiful kern that you've sown right now. It sounds like you're consolidating a lifetime's worth of experiences within the university that you're hoping to create now that you've sown the seeds for it. And I remember when you were in the garden and you were talking about the rewilding, the idea that the groups of people going out rewilding, and you mentioned to me about that there's more interaction between humans and nature in people's gardens, in these cultivated gardens. Would you like to explain to everyone else a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I will do that. Before I say, the university exists already, both in terms of teachings with Grow Your Own Health for the last 8 years. And to say it was inspired really by Aristotle, who coined the phrase, the whole is more than the sum of its parts, which some of you might know. And also by Hippocrates. You know that doctors take the oath of Hippocrates. I always say they do the Hippocratic oath, actually, rather than of Hippocrates nowadays, because do no harm. But there's also the saying of Hippocrates, which is, let thy food be thy medicine, and thy medicine thy food. And if I only actually the last 2 years realized what that means. The less we eat, and the more high nourishing quality food we eat, the more it becomes our medicine. And it goes hand in hand with the principles of biodynamics. The less we put inputs into the farm individuality, the farm organism of a land where we do this integration of work with nature, without and within, the healthier and more unique this organism will be, and the healthier it will be to nourish us and restore the depleted soils. So just to put that up front. And to your question of the rewilding and that there's more biodiversity in people's gardens in the cities than in nature, it's a tall order to digest as a statement. But there's scientific evidence by the British Wildlife Trust, who actually went round into different natural environments and into city gardens and did do a count of just all the different creatures that were there. And it came up, it's like tenfold in the city because of our incredible integration of food plants, herbs, flowers, ornamentals, trees, and it's all there in the city with the multitude of interests that each individual brings, creating multi-million times more biodiversity in the city gardens and the parks than out in a forest. And I'll give you another example, juxtaposition to that. If you go to Ashdown Forest here, where I'm just living at the edge of, Ashdown Forest, the way it is now, is a ruin of what it used to be when the crofters used to farm the forest. Forest means clearing, doesn't mean woodland. Woodland are trees and wooded areas or big extensions like the rainforest or big woodlands in the mountainsides. Often we have big extensions of woodlands. Forest means actually clearing. So Ashdown Forest was cleared by the crofters. There were thousands of crofters living on 6,000 acres of Ashdown Forest, clearing the forest enough, having enough clearings with the forest and keeping the trees, saplings down, where the heather developed as a unique species of plants, different types of heather and other wild plants that attracted butterflies and insects from as far away as the Pyrenees in the south and as far away as to the Scottish Highlands from the north. And they all started uniting here in Ashdown Forest, thanks to the crofters, thanks to the farmers, the non-interventional farmers, the homesteaders, the ones that just lived with nature in harmony. Same happened in the Amazon forest. When I was 26, I met multidisciplinary scientists in the Edinburgh International Conservation Conference that I was sent to by my professor at the time when I studied at Emerson College. I was in my third year of studying biodynamics. He sends me up and give a lecture on biodynamics. And one guy comes up who studied the Amazon rainforest, and there's much more evidence now than there ever has been. He studied it in the 60s and 70s, so a long time ago. And he said we had multidisciplinary teams finding out that the seeds and the plants that you find in such biodiversity in such intense small areas around settlements of the tribal people, they were actually coming from thousands of kilometers away, and they integrated them and planted them just like we in the cities and places are planting them. And they're finding now that the Amazon with the terra preta, which is this black soil that's meters deep, that was created by dense population pressure and people living very close together, they developed these deep soils that sustain millions of people where now maybe hundreds of people cannot even survive. So the rainforest was like a living, abundant larder, both for food, for medicine, for building material, for everything that the people needed. And it was brought from a long distance away, just like in England or United Kingdom or whatever we're going to call it. I call it Albion, usually the White Island. We brought plants from all around the world and have them here in all the seeds and create, actually, I believe, I'm making a statement and I want to prove it one day. Britain has probably the highest biodiversity, both in people and also in wild plants and cultured plants, what have you. So if you talk about wild or natural fauna and flora, we have the highest diversity here, I think, because of what the empire did to the world of stealing everything. But now I'm here in England to give back. It's the time from here now to give back because we've got all the riches to share. What do we live for? I mean, happiness comes only from sharing. If we can share what we have, that's happiness. That's economy. That's abundance. That's riches. But having it is not rich. That's poverty. That's a poverty mentality. So That's why the university has been created, to really bring people together from all walks of life to then serve humanity as a whole. And we're on a good trajectory for expanding our work into the next years.
So where's this Ashton? Did you say Ashton Farm or
Ashdown Forest is in the southeast of England, and I forgot to mention it's a site of scientific international interest, SSII, which borders on Michael Hall Steiner School, where I used to work and develop a environmental program where we would work with the rangers and do experiments on the forest. And it's a beautiful haven of environment to live in. I mean, it's very magic, because it attracts, because it was such a well-prepared place by the farmers, and the biodiversity that was created by the farmers, it attracted also biodiversity of people, international communities of spiritual movements, headquarters of spiritual movements, and colleges and what have you. It's because the farmers prepared it. Just a little anecdote. Rudolf Steiner, when he started his work, there you go. That's a very famous tree.
It's Friends Clump,
Winnie the Pooh Bridge. That tree was, these trees were planted in commemoration of the Queen up in Gill's Lap, where you have a huge view. You can see the North Downs, which is a limestone outcrop, and the South Downs down near Brighton and Eastbourne places. And this whole area used to be once upon a time covered in limestone. That's why supposedly it attracts so many spiritual movements, because the limestone was eroded away. And then now is the spiritual space is filled with spiritual investigation, spiritual science and spiritual investigation, Rosicrucians, anthroposophists, Scientologists. You have the White Brotherhood there right next to the MOD in the bunker. It's an amazing area. It's got everything there you can imagine, you know, even in terms of social, political and governing structures.
Yeah, there's a Winnie the Pooh Sticks Bridge.
That's it. Yeah, we just saw it earlier. Yeah.
Yep.
There it is. Yeah, that's the one I took my kids to. I lived on and off here 45 years. I always come back here to recharge my batteries, because it's so healing, this environment. It's really like a semi-natural, cultured, very spiritually orientated community of people and nature living together in kind of a harmony. And the forest is now being taken on by farm people with ponies and with sheep and with horses again, to keep the bracken down and spend less money to keep the biodiversity up and running. And here you have a picture of the bleak grey sky we are having these days with November weather blowing through the fronts.
Yeah, but
there you see the views of the South Downs. Beautiful, beautiful. To vision. If you want to become a visionary, come to Ashdown Forest. I can only say it's probably more of a place for visioning than even Glastonbury or other places I've visited in my trajectories of looking for spiritual places. Anyway, that's a bit sidetracking from the wildlife and from rewilding, but it gives you a little bit of a different perspective of what does rewilding really do? Nothing.
Good question.
Nothing. It leaves the land and nature to heal itself, but nature in itself, if we, through conventional farming, compact soil and eliminate all the soil life from the soil through conventional farming, through applying chemicals and artificial fertilizers, and then leave that land to itself, it's like going to a terminally ill person and going, you huddle up in a corner and your nature will heal yourself without any other help from medical, complementary, functional medicine input. So I would say the opposite is now the case. We don't need to rewild. We need to become healers of the land. We, the farmers, the gardeners, the custodians of the land, need to learn about the modern way of shamanism, alchemy, and magic that we can do to the land to heal it again, as a community of the nature beings and human beings working together.
Wow.
Abandoning it. You know, we're abandoning nature. It's like putting a kid on the street and go, educate yourself. And we see what happens in the favelas in Brazil and in other shanty towns, with the kids, with street kids. They die very early, they mature very quickly, they have a short life, they have a miserable life, they have to survive. Nature is about survival, has no moral, in my opinion. The moral comes through the human consciousness, and the human community carries the consciousness of Mother Earth and the cosmos, the Father, Heaven. And we bring the two together, and in that beautiful space where the water and our consciousness mingle, new culture and new potential starts developing. And that's what we're doing in the university with lots of holistic, integrated, multidisciplinary professionals that are coming in now to teach and to create unity through diversity.
That's amazing. That's beautiful. And a lovely vision of what you want to do.
Well, it's a dream come true finally, because I held that dream since I was a teenager. I was desolate. As a teenager, I was desolate. I was like, no kids. This world is not worth to even bring kids into. It's such a dreadful place. Now I see this place being heaven on earth.
Oh.
So very great transformation. As you grow older, you start seeing the context and not what happens to you, but what we can make happen.
And so can you tell us a little bit more about the cosmos, the way in which you look at the cosmos and the elements and how that helps Mother?
The cosmos is a mystery, really, and we discover new things all the time. And I've only really started sort of scientifically exploring the cosmos and astrophysics and the space weather the last 5-6 years, but particularly because I have a heart condition that seemed to be correlating with when we had sunspots and sun flares and coronal mass ejections. My heart rhythm would go out and go arrhythmic. And then I started looking at the calendar of Maria Thun. We have our own calendar that we produce through Flourish, which looks at all the different days in the week and what you can do in the garden according to the cosmic impulses. But when there are days when the moon or any planet goes through the ecliptic of the sun, that's the time when the sun has already had sun flares, or there are coronal holes where sun winds are emanating from the sun and they hit the earth when the planets go through the nodal points, through this ecliptic path of the sun. And when that happens, it disturbs the electromagnetic field of the earth, even the tectonic plates. And, that's proven now. And 80% of people, when there's sun flares, have a chance, if they have a weak heart, to have a heart attack or some coronal. There's even something called in the heart the coronal, the micro capillaries that are surrounding the heart that stop supplying the oxygen for the heart, and people have a heart attack or have a heart condition when that electromagnetic field change happens, because the heart is the biggest electromagnetic organ that we have in the body, and the fastest neurological processor that we have in the body also. So when I discovered that, I realized what I learned 50 years ago almost in Emerson College with the Maria Thun calendar and the aspects of the planets, particularly the moon, in the different constellations and in relationship to the sun, and also in terms of the height at which they are in the sky, influences plant growth tremendously or inhibits plant growth detrimentally. And when I did a lot of experiments during my student years and also teaching years at Emerson College, I was there 10 years altogether, I realized that even my children were affected by these planetary aspects. And I did a huge research of every day living religiously with a calendar and looking at all the aspects of the planets in relationship to the constellations and each other, and realized they're influencing children, they're influencing people who have ailments like heart conditions or other conditions. And we are an interconnected living organism that's much bigger than us or the Earth. It goes out into the cosmos. And the planets are like the actors and the moderators of what happens on the Earth, with the cosmic forces coming from our galaxy and from the galaxies and the eternity of the universe that's, ever expanding and ever growing and ever living. It's eternity, it's ever present, and it's impulsing. I found out 3 days ago from an astrophysicist who is one who really shifted the paradigm in the 1990s, that from the center of the galaxy, we have rhythmic impulses that come every 5,700 years, which coincides with the Mayan calendar and coincides with 2012, to upgrade the Earth to a new consciousness and nature to evolve. We're in the middle of that right now. And I knew this since I was a kid, since I was 17, when I had the download about the Mayans. I was aware of the Mayan prophecy that we would enter a golden age. We would enter an age of community building and abundance. And on the other hand, in school and through the Club of Rome, I was told there's limited resources and we have to live in poverty. So I all my life looked for finding tools, methods, and approaches to life that embraces that spiritual abundance. That's the new life that comes from the cosmos. All the abundance and new life comes from the cosmos. There are people who are trying to isolate us from that, obviously, because then we can live in poverty, which is much nicer for some than others, instead of all of us living an abundant life. And the only way to do that is to really tune into this and work via the plants and via the animals to let that cosmic life force and cosmic new information and light come into the earth, feed the intelligence of the soil, and then the soil will nourish the plants, inform the plants, the soil life, and the plants and the animals that eat the plants, and us eating three kingdoms of nature, informing us and raising the consciousness and becoming the light and becoming the stardust that comes in every moment. It's transformed in the earth through the plants, the animals, and us. And then the new consciousness is informing the cosmos, and it's a biofeedback system. And that's what we do in biodynamics. So we work consciously and scientifically, not as a hunch. It's all like scientifically worked with the last 100 years to apply that very systematically and very methodologically to growing plants and raising animals and raising our consciousness.
So it's not just all about produce being seasonally available then. There's a whole, there's a bigger world.
So I'm starting with a bigger impulse. Now,
Yeah.
all these rhythms that are cosmic, I talk about 5,700 years. Platonic year is 25,920. It's like 3 times or 4 times that rhythm. Then you have the smaller rhythms. You have the year rhythm. Then you have the 11-year rhythms of the sun and the 666-year cycles, which you can also, point down the changes in consciousness and climate and everything else. And then you got the year rhythm, and then you got the month rhythm, and then you got the day rhythm. And then you got within the day rhythm, you got other rhythms that we all take into account in biodynamics to harvest, sow, and treat the soil at certain times with our alchemical preparations that we're producing also to heal the soil and direct the plant growth and the maturation and the nutrition quality of the plants. We specifically apply those in relationship to those rhythms and their dynamic relationship to each other. That's why it's called biodynamics. Biological, we work with the biological world and the living rhythms of biology. We know rhythm is life. You look at kids, they're never tiring and they're always in rhythm. They're always in that flow. And, I will say now women have that quality and that tendency, that possibility naturally more than men. Men, we are more like let's cut to the chase. Let's, do the straight line. Let's not flow. Let's get straight to the point, and we destroy everything with that consciousness. It's reductionist, it's logistic, it's all logic. Whereas the feminine is more of feeling our way and going with the flow and being in the rhythm. And then I really see this as an essential healing for the future, is men and women, the feminine and the masculine, particularly the sacred part in ourselves, needs to mingle in that dynamic relationship, to come into complementary relationship with ourselves, each other as men and women, and also with nature, to get into a higher level of dynamic relationship that creates abundance. And that's what we're working towards and exploring in the Wholistic Living University, of how to create that. And out of the moment, it's intuitive, and it's also deeply based in scientific research and memories of tools and methods that can be used, but always adapted to the moment, because every moment is unique. And that makes life just so enriching, so beautiful, so exciting, so full of surprises,
Yeah, I'm just trying to imagining all these different multitudes of rhythms that are coming together. And tell me, in the daily aspect, your calendar, does this bring all of those rhythms together? They are predictable. They are.
Yeah.
Can.
So we're working with. I'll give you a practical example. Say, for example, it's spring right now. I mean, well, I can give you an example right now. We can still sow carrots, for example. Broad beans and garlic. It's a bit late, but because of the climate change, there's a lot of possibilities that we can do that. So today is the 27th, and the moon, if you look at the moon every day, it's going to be higher and higher in the sky, so it's ascending. So that's what we use in biodynamics for sowing instead of the phases of the moon, because there was a lot of research done that shows that it's beneficial. And let me just see. So sometimes this week, there is one day, I can't see it right now, I haven't got my glasses, where you can sow garlic and sow broad beans, because the moon is either in the constellation of a Earth constellation or a warmth constellation. So each constellation, like in astrology, have different elements that they are actually raying into the Earth. And these forces of the different elements enhance the growth of different parts of plants. And that's been very meticulously researched over 50 years in Germany in 3 different farms in 3 different climatic zones by Maria Thun, who then developed the Maria Thun calendar. And she was able to discern through sowing every few hours where one constellation starts and other one stops.
Wow.
And it's not the astronomical zodiac, it's not the astrological, it's not the Ayurvedic, it's the sidereal zodiac as it exists now, and the forces are coming in every moment, informing the plants to grow. Say, for example, your garlic, if you would plant it on a warmth constellation, it would just wanting to go to flower. It wouldn't grow any bulbs or any cloves, right? If I sow my broad bean on a Earth day, when the constellations via the moon radiate into the earth qualities, mineral dense qualities, the broad beans will not grow into beautiful pods. They will just grow strong root system and maybe accumulate more nitrogen, but don't produce as many pods because they're sown at the not so favorable time. Okay, so we're maximizing, optimizing the growth of the plants by only choosing the sowing date, and then choosing when to cultivate, choosing when to thin them, when to water them, when to apply the preparations, and when to harvest. And that way we increase the nutritional value and the yield. And then on top of it, we have the biodynamic preparations that we can use to direct the growth or the ripening. Very specifically, very scientifically, following the intuition and the observation of what's in front of us, being in touch with the plants constantly and feeling what they want to express at that moment. And then we can enhance it with a remedy we're giving through a preparation that we produce alchemically. It's
Can
a
you tell us
very
a little bit more
integrated
about
system.
this? Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about some of the preparations you use.
So the preparations are could for some people be very controversial, because we're doing in a way what genetic engineering does on a subnatural level. You know how they splice genes from animals into plants and use certain qualities from different realms of nature to enhance a plant? For example, with a say Bacillus thuringiensis is a bacterium that destroys the caterpillars, and it's then spliced into corn or the maize, and then the maize produces this poison that the caterpillar would actually produce in the plant. So they're bringing the plant and the animal kingdom together in a manipulative subnatural way, I call it. It's outside the laws of nature and outside the law of supernature, the supernatural, which is the invisible cosmic world. So they go into the underworld to create this manipulative, demonic substance and fusion of the animal and the plant world. In biodynamics, we do the same. We fuse animal, plant, and mineral world with higher consciousness in the supernatural, using supernatural wisdom, and alchemically create a substance, just like the herbalists in the Middle Ages would do. They would go, what's your temperament? What's your humor? And what is a plant that has that humor to enhance something that's lacking in you, and then enhance your human world with the herbs, with the plants? And we do that for the environment, for the nature outside, with mineral, plant, and animal substances that we bring together. So we, for example, take cow manure and we stuff the horn and we put it into Mother Earth when she's most alive in the winter. And that's our microbiological multiplier. And laboratory is not the laboratory locked away, isolated in a building. It's in Mother Earth, exposed to Father Cosmos, making love with Mother Earth. And the cow manure is then 100-fold enhancing the diversity of microbiome in that manure we stuff in the horn. When it comes out, it doesn't just have incredible richness of microbiome, it also has forces that came through the cosmic impulse in winter to create the new life for the new year, which is invisible. We call that the ether. And there are many scientists now talking about the ether again, which was basically made taboo 1920 when they introduced all the modern sciences and thinking just materialistically. And now there are scientists who now starting talking. I mean, we had, Keely and we had Tesla and we had Schauberger. They all worked with the etheric forces, not the energies, forces. And the forces manifest this energy as material. So you might say an idea or the world cosmic idea becomes warmth, then it becomes light, then it becomes air, then it becomes water, and then it becomes mineral. It mineralizes, it manifests. And in biodynamics, we have these tools to help that process to be enhanced. So manifestation, which then in the physical world creates abundance, can be enhanced through this alchemical, mystical approach to working with land and be a custodianship and carer for the land.
I know that you mentioned the horn, the cow manure and the horn. That's Rudolf Steiner's techniques, isn't it? And
so Rudolf Steiner brought that to the awareness of the public and the farmers in the 1920s, when conventional farming methods in Germany after the First World War took over, and fertility dropped out hugely. They couldn't have the cows keep the calves anymore. The grain couldn't be resown anymore. It wouldn't produce the grain yields they used to get because they started applying. Basically, they transformed ammunition, which is salpeter, into chemical fertilizer to feed the plants, which is a dead mineral, and it lowered the life forces in the plants. So he was called in 1924 to give people a new understanding of how to revitalize and how to regenerate and rejuvenate not just the soil, the plants, the animals and humans, but the whole cosmos connect again. Because we was falling out, so to speak, just like radioactive fallout has heavy physical matter that falls out of the life process, and he kills everything, you know.
Yeah, he buried
it. Steiner brought that. Yeah,
he buried it according to the moon cycle, isn't it? I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, and then, you know, if you want to use the descending moon to put your horn manure preparation, or you have the winter half year when the sun is really low, is when the time is when the soil is more alive. But just to say, Steiner did not necessarily invent all this. He studied all the natural traditional methods and all the natural sciences at the time, and then he came to conclusions how to do things which farmers had already done in Austria for, you know, centuries, if not millennia. For example, Schauberger and Steiner talk about the clay preparation, which if farmers plow a field, they put clay in a barrel and, you know, vortex the water for an hour and tone into it. They sing the octave into it, up and down, and put the carbon dioxide into the water, infuse it with soul forces to protect Mother Earth. When they take the protective grass away, then the cosmic forces can destroy the soil life. They replace it with a human-made protective shield, which is this clay preparation. And Steiner talks about this clay preparation in his lectures. So he gathered a lot of different information. He knew about silica. Silica is probably the most researched element now through the nano technology investigations in the big the fertilizer the fertilizer factories, where silica is in the chip, and it's all produced artificially, of course. Now it's the memory of a computer, it's the memory in your watch, but silica is also the communicator of the cosmic ideas and information of light and warmth to the plants to live more resilient against climate change, like, you know, cold, heat, wet, dry. The plants become more resilient. Well, there's a chemist that said nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium were the only fertilizers that counted that we need to replace. That was Justus von Liebig in the 1800s. And when he was 42, he said, no, it's silica which is the most important mineral. They're creating now nanosilica with subnatural forces and manipulation and nanification to fertilize the plants to achieve the same as what Steiner suggested to do with quartz crystals, grind them up, and then put them in a cow horn in the summer when the ripening forces are most intense in the earth in the summer, and then applying it to the plants to create higher nutritional values in the plants, and they can be kept longer without refrigeration because they're really mature, they have enough fiber, they have enough solidity and maturation. And he found a way, pragmatically, to make silica a fertilizer so it becomes bioavailable. Justus said it is an essential fertilizer, and we know now anybody who's got cancer or chronic illness lacks silica, because silica is the element that's most depleted in our soils. It's not bioavailable anymore. It's the hardest substance to get back into the flow of life, and biodynamics can do that.
Now, isn't strawberries contain silica? Is that one of its properties?
Strawberry has a lot of iron, vitamins. I would say it's not very high in silica. The plants highest in silica are the grasses with the stalks. Or if you look at trees, in the lignin and cellulose. Then silica is usually in the fiber and in the epidermis, in the skin, when they're really hard, where strawberries are very soft.
Right.
But strawberries could be helped to avoid botrytis by spraying silica, which then strengthens the epidermis, the skin of the strawberry, so the spores can't get in anymore. So we've got our fungicides and our pesticides are natural alchemically produced substances like silica to prevent and strengthen the plant.
I came across a place here on the Gold Coast called the Mudbrick Herb Farm, and they talked about comfrey as one of the most awesome bloody fertilizers that you could ever get.
Yeah.
So,
we use it a lot in liquid manures.
Yeah.
To enhance the growth, the vegetative growth, to get more yield. And it's really amazing plant for those who are gardeners if you apply it to tomatoes and the bean plants, because the chemical constituents are very similar to the nightshades and to the bean plants, who are both plants that alter our consciousness if we eat too much of it, or are detrimental to our health, because acidification is very strong through them, obviously, and it destroys to a great extent our microbiome or gut biome. So
they put comfrey in the bottom of the chook run, and so
in the bottom of the
chook run where they had the chickens, and so when they threw the scraps and they would roll down into the comfrey, and then the chickens would come and eat the comfrey. And so they didn't have to give them antibiotics, because all of a sudden the comfrey was making them stronger and bigger and
absolutely
very healthy bloody chickens.
There's comfrey and nettles, which are a real boon for the gardener and farmer, which is much undervalued.
So sorry, Priti, I'll just sort of taking over.
You keep going.
So good comment.
So you come into a patch of dirt, and I'm saying dirt, and it's got no life force in it whatsoever. I mean, I've been watching the Chinese and the desert, and they've been coming in and buying casuarina seeds from Australia. I mean, I'm talking millions and millions of casuarina trees.
Yeah.
And they're going there and they're creating the green wall using the casuarinas. So when you come to your patch of dirt, and I'm saying dirt, there's nothing growing in it, is one of your first things to do is to find out its pH level and how far down you got to go down through the strata to find out what you got in that strata before you can start working on that composition of that soil to help the earth. How do you start? What do you do?
Good suggestions there already. The soil, as I call it, or the mineral part of our land, is very important to know what it is. So you want to know the size of the particles, which we call texture, because if it's a clay soil, which is very fine, alluvial or windblown, or from glacial deposits, it's a potentially very rich soil. It can hold a lot of water and can hold lots of nutrients. If it's a sand, then you lose all the water that's well drained. Then you want to, as you say, dig a hole and see what's underneath. If you've got a layer of clay and you get waterlogging, nothing can grow because there's no drainage. So you want to know your topsoil, your subsoil, and your rock strata, and what the soil grew from. What's the mother rock, we call it in German, the mother rock, or the bedrock, we call it here. So you want to learn about that. You want to learn about your water availability, obviously, because if you don't have water, how can you get water? Well, we work with people in rural development that regreen deserts with pioneer plants that would create dew, which we also use in the gardens here now in England for drought conditions like last year. So ground cover plants that produce 1 to 2 millimeters of precipitation a night that you can sow in desert conditions, and you don't need to cultivate much, just scrape the soil a bit for the seed to germinate. And then just through the condensation every night, because of the high temperature in the day, cool temperature at night, the plants can create their own water. And then you start planting into that, more demanding plants. Unless you have oasis or a well available from somewhere to water your casuarina, the legumes like the casuarina and the acacia family are amazing for regenerating soils and for enriching soils. But to create a sowing bed or a growing environment for those, you have to condition the soil first with pioneer plants in a desert situation. And if you were to spray horn manure preparation, you would increase the precipitation every night of the humidity that you would get in your desert condition. And I worked a lot in Spain and arid climates where the horn manure preparation was the key to making plants really survive better.
So when you say the manure, are we talking cow manure, horse manure, chicken manure?
Cow manure. Cow manure, if possible. There is a possibility of using horse manure, which has not been researched enough. And I'm sure in the future there will be many more preparations as people start researching other possibilities. We've only been given literally an indication, like say Madame Curie gave indications about how the atom, has its expressions of radioactivity if we split it, certain atoms. We're just given the rudimentary indications, and we're only just 100 years old in biodynamics. We have to research a lot more. And Podolinsky in Australia has done amazing work. There's some amazing people in Australia who even sprayed a 500, the horn manure preparation, from aeroplanes in 10,000s of acres because they got such big extensions. And, the sheep and the grass is just flourishing because of the horn manure preparation in Australia.
So, I mean, the largest manure factory would be the human sewage farms. So, is there anything?
Yeah, now that's a whole nother subject, Jeffrey. Steiner talks about the human manure. And of course, after the war, they fertilized a lot of fields in Berlin and other places in Germany and also here in England. And it's doing it again now with sludge and slurry from human manure, and after processing it somewhat, you're short-circuiting nature. So basically, nature brings in the life forces, the soul qualities, and the spirit from the cosmos and concentrates it in a plant. And then your animals, they eat from the land and concentrate that even more. And then their manures, fertilizes, feeds the soil to feed the plants. That's a very long cycle. Think of slash and burn. For 40 years, you have trees growing that connect with the cosmic environment. And then you have that fertility build up over 40 years. You slash it down, you burn it, and you grow 3 years of crops. Those crops grow really healthy and well. If you start using human manure or urine exclusively, you as human being take these life forces and these soul and spirit forces out of your food, and what comes out the other side is dead mineral. It's like a fertilizer. It's dead. It's soulless. It's spiritless. So what we have to do if we want to use human manure is we need to mix it with wood chips and make a long-term 3-year compost, and then you have a very, very good fertilizer feeder for the soil to feed the plants.
All right. Is that because if you've got vegetarians or vegans, you could use their manure, but generally speaking, if people are on drugs or chemical-based pills, substances that are getting mixed into the sewage farmers, you just
that's a whole nother threat that is now happening. Is estrogen and xenoestrogens and other substances can get into the food chain, which would be very detrimental both for the soil and for humans to eat from there. But on a higher level, if you think that we as humans, we literally we mineralize the food that we eat, we destroy it 100%, take all the goodness out of it, and what's coming out is a dead mineral fertilizer. And
I know
that has to be then rejuvenated over 2-3 years with a substance like tree mulch or leaves or whatever, or chips, because the tree has the strongest connection with the cosmos and the life forces, and the remineralization of that manure that we depleted. We take all the minerals out for our thinking. We take everything out for our soul life. We take everything out for our own life from the plants and everything, and it's dead. It's it's nothing there, and that's why it has E. coli and other very low organisms that are not very helpful for plants. So it has to be rejuvenated before we use it. And if we don't do that, we short circuit that cycle, and we deplete humanity of their spiritual development.
I know in New Zealand there, in the Bay of Plenty, they discovered that the land lacked cobalt. And so during the Depression, they went and put cobalt into the ground, and then they were able to go and plant Pinus radiata trees, which took 25 years to grow. So they got a harvest, but it was coming back to find out what was the mineral that was missing, and it was cobalt. So in your case, when you go to that particular piece of dirt, you've done your soil samples or your core and all that stuff, and you found you might hit a bed of clay. If you get bentonite or kaolin clay, does that have much of a major impact? Because I mean, bentonite's used for dam construction, it's used for bloody animal feed, and it's used for bloody drilling rigs.
So if you find you have a soil poor in clay, which is these fine particles, then what we do in biodynamics is we make compost if we have any organic material that we can either get from the land or we have to maybe import. In that situation, you might have to import it. Put it through the compost process. So the bentonite's locked into the humus complex, because humus and clay together are 10 times more effective than just bentonite and humus on their own. And the soil, once you put it separately in the soil, does not reconstitute it like a compost. So in biodynamics, we are really strong on composting, and we got the compost preparations that enhance that process of creating a stable clay humus mineral that maybe with a bit of lime creates also a base saturated humus that then is the best basis for growing your plants, whatever you want to grow in your soil, whatever soil it is.
Hey, moving across to Findhorn, for example, which was all sand. I've gone up there 3 times to investigate it and found it quite exhilarating to realize they brought in the element of the spiritual kingdom, and particularly Pan and all the devas. And sand, and then also to grow these humongous big vegetables because they were working with the spiritual kingdoms.
Absolutely.
So you've actually tinkered on it, but by saying God, our grandfather, the sky, and grandmother, and all that stuff. But you're using that, aren't you? You're working with that.
Let's say it this way: most biodynamic farmers, and myself included, I have not had practical experience in perceiving elemental beings and Pan and the devas, for example. We know of it. I know of it. I've seen results of their working through my biodynamic work, and lifetime of work out in nature and in the garden. And I know that Findhorn was only able to create those cabbages in the beginning because, first of all, they had to convince the world that there's another way of working with nature than against it. And Peter Caddy was a devout Rosicrucian, so a devout spiritual adept. And he was also a student of biodynamic farming and gardening and organic farming and gardening. And then Eileen was the one who, when meditating at night and connect with the devas, so the angelic world that directs the elemental beings of a certain microclimate, a certain micro area, which was there, forest, that area with the sandy dunes that were there and the pine forests. And the elemental beings are the ones who are actually transporting the minerals and the water and the air to the plants to make them grow better. So the devas informed Eileen informed Peter, and Peter was told, well, put a bit more of this compost or this manure or this there and that and the other. And together with the spiritual world and the physical, practical methodology that Peter knew, they brought it together. And that's what we're basically doing in biodynamics too, but maybe a bit more scientific based, because we do spiritual investigation in the spiritual world also with knowledge of the higher worlds. But they were like forerunners of exemplary results. And there are many people in most countries now have people like that, have those capacities, because we've evolved over these 100 years, much more clairvoyant, so to speak, much more open to this kind of working.
Yeah, well, they're very fortunate. They've got Dorothy McLean, and then they got Neil Abercrombie. It was Neil Abercrombie who had the actual physical eyes to see all the little nature spirits.
That's right. Yeah, his experience in the botanical garden with Pan and all that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So they were really connected, and I think that's really needed now for us to. There's a lot of conferences I hear about. I'm personally not that interested in that area yet. I need to be growing up a little bit more to get into the land of the fairies. I've seen fairies, but I'm sort of more of a practitioner, like
you need to get
to the physical world.
You need to get, was the name Titania and Oberon?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah, and they're there. I trust them. They're there. They're helping. but I just haven't had a conversation yet.
Just changing the subject now and going across to Russia or the Siberia.
Yeah.
There was a series of books there. I think there was 10 in all, and it was called The Ringing Cedars.
Yep.
With the
Yep.
And she actually spoke to him about what you were talking about with the cosmic energies and how to get the seeds and actually place those seeds in your mouth to actually build up the actual your actual phlegm, if you want to call it such, your DNA that was actually crusted around the seed.
That's it. Yep.
And then you would then take the seeds and place them into the above the sky above you to cool down the cosmic energy. And you had the seeds in your mouth for about 9 minutes, I should say. That's pretty important. And then when you sowed them, so those seeds, when they matured and produced the fruit, that fruit was actually geared up for your own personal well-being.
That's correct. Yeah, absolutely. That's if you need to go through a healing process and you want the best food for you as an individual, you're priming through your RNA, through your genetic information in your probe in your gut, in your mouth biome, which is the most complex biome we have, is in the mouth. And you put the seed in there, it primes the seed to inform the soil biome to work on behalf of you to create the best food. Now, I always say to people, if we want to heal, that's great. If we want to have community, there's been a lot of research that if we eat as a community the food from the same soil, that's then sprayed either with just, biodynamic preparations or just organic compost or what have you, it creates a common ground for what we eat together. It informs our gut biome as a community. And they found in the social research that there was more social cohesion and more similar thinking and less conflict in the community.
Is that right?
So I would say, depending what we want to achieve, we use maybe this method you just described for personal healing. But if we do that too long, we isolate ourselves from the others. If everybody would just grow food for themselves with their own saliva, they would isolate themselves in their thinking and feeling level from other people. So if we have a garden together, and I always joke to people, if you want a communal information, have a big bowl in the hall and everybody spits in it and we put the seed in there.
God.
Man.
Make it very appetizing. But I mean, it would work. It would work. It's just, you think it would work but beyond that, I think there's more to it than just relating food to yourself, to myself. There's something about me as my higher self also connecting with the cosmos, and that's what we bring in with the biodynamic preparations. So I think the biodynamic preparations replace old methodologies of the shamanic approach in the past with modern shamanism and modern alchemy.
Right. And so where do you get your organic seeds then? I mean, because that's
organic seeds and biodynamic seeds. We have seed growers here in UK. We have about 6 seed growers who produce maybe 5% of the organic seed needed in Britain. Then we've got big seed companies that were conventional seed companies. They sell a lot of seed, and also these seed growers that come from Germany, Austria, Holland, Switzerland. They're mostly biodynamically grown seeds that are imported here and sold as organic here. And so most of the seed imported is from those countries, and it's become really difficult with Brexit to do that. So here in England, only about 10% of organic seed is grown here. We're short of organic seed for growing organic food in commercial settings. We have maybe only 40% of the seed that we would need to grow with open pollinated seeds in UK. The rest are growing with F1 hybrids, say Riverfoot, for example, which is a big organic seed food grower and distribution organization, multi-billion business. They use exclusively F1 hybrid seeds. Now, if we use F1 hybrid seeds, I've done experiments, and many people have done experiments. They're not open to the cosmic environmental influences nor human influences that grow the plants. So they're isolated. They're just looking at the soil, where the minerals because they've been bred and selected in conventional settings. They're not sensitized to give us the food that we need in organic, feeding people in an organic consciousness that would raise our spirit and our soul to a higher consciousness. So we're in a big fix of needing more seed growers.
Understand. And so I'll just unmute Priti there. I've just hogged all the question there. Priti, do you want to take over? You got any questions?
I wanted to come back to the idea that you mentioned beforehand about the climate change. What kind of climate changes are we experiencing? Are they natural forces, or are they something that we as humans have contributed to?
Well, if you look at the weather, and I do a lot of weather forecasting every week for our participants on the online course here in Britain, and also for people if they're in the States. If you look at temperature differences between natural environment like here in Ashdown Forest and London, there's usually a 5-degree difference in temperature.
Okay, yeah, that's quite understandable. Yeah.
If you live on the west side or southwest, if that's your predominant wind direction of a city has a heat bell. Okay, so on the west side, southwest side of London, with 10 million people producing heat through combustion and houses being heated and the sun hitting concrete and tarmac, it radiates heat back at night. It creates a heat bell. And if there's a weather front coming, also with Gatwick Airport and Heathrow and the airports particularly, you see huge cloud systems building up on the west side of the airports and of major highways where they're concentrated and cities. And it creates huge weather systems that dump huge amounts of water, making other areas like Norfolk and Suffolk and any northeastern side of London drought areas, where you have maybe on the west side of London rains that you get on the west coast, up to 1,500 millimeters of rain, and on the east side only 200. I had the same experience in my hometown. Where I lived on the southwest side, we had like 900 to 1,000 millimeters of rain. On the northeast side, in the wind shadow of the town, they only had 200 to 300 millimeters, just like with London here. So that's a major climate change on a very local scale. And nobody talks about that local scale climate change, which is when you put the weather stations into London, we got global heating. And the city's becoming so dominant everywhere and centers of population. That creates global warming, but in very local isolated areas. And in the rest of the country, it creates weather chaos. Extreme weather. Now, we have biodynamic preparations that work specifically with those extremes that I mentioned earlier, which is heating, cooling, that's more extreme, and wetting and drying more extreme, like we've seen over the last 30, 40 years. Now, that's human-made. Okay, in a nutshell. Now, we have a greater cycle, which is the cosmic cycle. I talked earlier about these impulses coming from the galaxy, of the center of the galaxy, and the Mayan calendar, and the 666-year sun cycle and the 11-year sun cycle.
666 cycle, yeah.
Right? Okay. Yeah. They're very famous figures because those are times of changes of consciousness and weather. And they happen every 333 years. If you look 1666, 1998, 1332, 666, they're all very strong. If you look at the historic books and the core of the ice layers now, they've got right back to the ice ages, all proven it's cosmic influence. It's not man-made.
Right.
So we have to distinguish between man-made influences and the things people don't talk about at all, which gets me really red hot in the face, is the chemical pollution. Nobody talks about that. It's CO2. CO2 is 0.0003% of CO2 in the atmosphere. If you change that by 1%, you've changed it to 0.00031. We have 79% nitrogen. Nobody talks about the nitrous oxides that are polluting the environment through overhead electric wires and 5G and 4G and all the electrostatic pollution that happens. That creates nitrites and sulfates in the air that obliterate the lungs of people, particularly in the cities. And you can go down the rabbit hole and study that, and you start going, why don't they talk about that? Why are they not concerned about our health, real health? When I say they, the government, the powers to be, whatever. So I promote conscious study of weather, history, sun cycles, astrophysics, astro weather, earth weather, local weather. Be very specific what you study, don't generalize. And so I teach all that on my Grow Your Own Health program, because I want people to know as much about nutrition and about good food and about lifestyle changes and how to study life so we can become more discerning, and not just about gardening. It's not just about gardening. So yes, there is climate change, and there always has been climate change. There always going to be. It's just, how do we work with it? So not what happens to us, what do we make happen from that? And what I'm seeing, just as a snippet now for people to have hope, since 2010, around that time, I'm doing a lot of landscaping, a lot of hedge trimming, and a lot of growing of food and stuff. Since 2010, we have 2 to 3 times the amount of vegetative growth, abundant growth in nature. It's a little bit more CO2, but the energies that are coming in from the cosmos right now are just outrageous. And they're enhancing. So if we can channel that energy, direct that energy and those forces into a way of create abundant food, which again, in conventional farming, you can't do that because you're eliminating and isolating plants from that influence. You need to work organically with permaculture or no-dig or any of these organic methods or biodynamics to captivate that new energy and force. We're going to grow abundant food. We're going to grow abundant organic matter to create compost and humus to rejuvenate the dead soils that have been killed by conventional agriculture. So nature is always balancing itself out.
Yeah.
In that way, we are the interface to make the best use of that with the best technologies and the best methods and approaches. But for that, we have to study and go into our intuitive spiritual awareness and also clairvoyant awareness, because we do get downloads and we do get insights in that.
So the general media context of climate change, is it right for me to have assumed from what you've said is that we have climate change, we've always had climate change, it's taken out of context, it's narrowed down its perspective to blow it out of proportion?
It's there just like in 1960 with the Club of Rome, to instill a certain consciousness of poverty and not enough, and also right now into the carbon footprint side of things. I've just read an article that in New Zealand, for example, and probably the same is happening in Australia and also happens here in Scotland, huge investing corporations taking out the sheep farmers, just like what happened in the Enclosure Act in the 1700s here in England with industrialization, a reason to take over farmland by the big estates to get people into the cities and become slaves to the industry. And then the villains that resisted here during the Enclosure Act ended up in Australia and New Zealand as the villains to repopulate the continent there because it was the harshest environment. And the people who were starved to death in Ireland, that was actually all planned also, by the way. There were 2 major wet weather periods that there were meteorologists and people knowing these rhythms, that they're cosmic rhythms of 7 years I haven't mentioned before. We have, the 7 fat and the 7 meager years in the Bible.
Yeah.
That's all part and parcel of the powers to be in the 1800s, having flooded the Irish and the English market with cheap grain from the United States at the time, whatever it was called at the time, the colonies, to lower the price of grain, to force the farmers to grow potatoes. And they knew there was wet weather coming and potatoes would not thrive in wet weather. and the potato blight took everything out. So they starved people to death in Ireland twice to repopulate Northern America. And you can go deep into that kind of study, you know. So what I'm trying to say is at this moment, they're doing the same thing with a carbon footprint sort of agenda of getting people into the smart cities. So there's more control and there's less freedom for the individual to really live a harmonious life with nature. And nature itself is abandoned with rewilding. I don't condone that, and I do everything I can through the work in the university and through studies and research and also clear thinking that we can counteract that and get people back to the land.
Wow.
Huge task.
I know.
So, you know, it's a really, for me, it's really exciting to do that work, because it's actually, we're going against the stream on some level, but we know the future will require that of us, because there will be so many refugees that I see and I have seen all my life. And I always worked in places with refugees in my humanitarian aid work over the last 45 years. There's going to be a huge amount of political and food refugees that are going to come back to the land. And we need to create the places now with very dignified architecture, living architecture, healthy food, nutritious food, governance that is a sociocratic governance, and also education that's nature orientated. Nature and cosmos orientated. I should include the father.
Understand. Hey, in Australia, we had a guy called Peter Andrews, and he was pillared, but the guy was an amazing guy. He could actually regreen valleys. And
amazing.
You know the guy, Peter Andrews?
Haven't heard of him. No.
Right.
They're too far away.
Yes. Okay. My apologies. And so, what he did to his property, the bank then forced him off his property. But then one of the major retailers got him to come onto his property, and he actually greened it up. And then he then got to another billionaire, and they greened up his valley. So his concept was, first of all, water. And then you got to get where humanity gone along and created drains, which is just straight down the line, he'd stop that from happening, and he would then go and make sure that the creeks and the streams would meander around, and he would actually throw in logs, he'd throw in rocks, and consequently the water would sort of back up and create these little ponds. And then what would actually happen, little insects or something, or little things would start happening in those water backwaters, and then the insects would come, and then the birds would come, and then the birds would be dropping the seeds and all this stuff. And then as a consequence, all of a sudden we got all these natural native trees growing. And once the trees created the canopy, I mean, trees like just trying to think of the fast growing tree, wattle. So wattle would go for about 7 years and die off, but it would grow so quick it would create a canopy, and then the other plants would come underneath and be protected by it. And then, of course, boom, boom. And so he actually greened it. So when the helicopter from, I think it was the ABC television, went around, and they saw everything else was just in drought. And then they went through the valley, and it was just green as anything. And so they had to go and reteach all these so-called experts who've got these man-made degrees to come in and say, well, this is how you do it. Yeah.
Beautiful example that you elucidate there, because it's about soil. Water conservation is the paramount, amount of work we have to do in this integrated natural way, like you're describing there. It's beautiful. What a lovely progression that you described there in terms of the different nature kingdoms supporting each other and the trophic chain.
I want to move to the next one, which is the mycelium network with fungi.
Yeah.
So do you go in, and when you're creating your compost and all that stuff, are you actually, is the fungi just naturally coming together, or are you throwing in the spores to enable it to come together?
So amazing, that question, because the other day someone asked me, how is it that I'm building compost and I'm having worms in there, wigglers and all sorts of worms in the compost? Where do they come from? I lived in Sierra de Gredos in the center of Spain for a year, and there was a new building site, and it was an old vineyard which was conventional, so they probably would have killed everything off for decades before, or even, you know, maybe 100 years, I don't know. And there was no life in the soil. It was very sandy and dead and dry and what have you. And I started building a kitchen compost with cardboard and, you know, everything I had at hand, a bit of water to water it. I did not inoculate that pile, not even with the biodynamic preparations. In 8 months, there were more wigglers in that pile than actual material. Where did they come from?
I don't know. You're telling the story. I'm really interested.
And, you know, you talk about the mycelium. Where does the mycelium come from? A friend of mine, and when I first started studying biodynamics, I really had a strong sense that, you know, the creation is not finished. So when were these beings that we're talking, the mycelium, which are the root system of the mushrooms, really, or the worms, or how were they created? When were they created, and how did they get created? Out of blue thin air? Maybe. And I'm sometimes thinking the creation is going on. So if we work with these elemental beings, if we work with the devas, the angelic world and the higher worlds, are they still creating with us and manifesting out of thin air? Or, like you're describing, maybe in a more material way, that once you have a certain environment, the insects and, you know, the birds are attracted. The birds are the worst digesters of anything. So a lot of microbes and a lot of worm eggs are eaten, and they come to the food pile, my compost pile, and have a materialistic explanation, right? And then the food chain starts happening, and then it goes to the garden beds, and the garden waste goes back to the compost, and then you have like this biofeedback loop and what they call the trophic or the food chain, right? But there must be something more happening, because in 1987, around the St. Michael line, which is a major ley line going through Britain, and the Mary line, they found butterflies, 3 or 4 species of butterflies that they had thought were extinct. Either the eggs survived or they manifested again. When you listen to Zach Bush and other people studying the major the sixth extinction right now, or the major 5 extinctions before, after every extinction period, there was more biodiversity than before. How is that possible? Where does that come from? And if we study anthroposophy in Rudolf Steiner, he explains very clearly that everything that evolves into higher principles of diversity come from the spiritual world, through human consciousness and the angelic consciousness and the higher consciousness of the invisible beings. And it's manifesting, as it were, you know, out of the cosmos into Earth's presence. And that's why we have in Darwin's explanation in the Tree of Life, these jumps of evolution. Nobody can explain how one species evolved out of another, really, because there were jumps in consciousness of evolution and instantaneous almost manifestation, like you have, you know, spontaneous remission and healing and what have you. So that's my long, short answer to your question.
Yeah.
We don't have to bring it in, it's there.
Yeah.
It sounds very much like trying to fathom the unfathomable. And maybe we should just be in awe of it and just bow our heads and go, oh, it's amazing. It's brilliant. It's awesome.
Is a vessel of recognition of what is not yet, to receive it into the Holy Grail, because it's that invisible trust and, you know, openness of the unfathomable and the providence that's there, to really trust that and not get locked down into all these things and problems that are in front of us, not in the nitty-gritty. Open up to the major, greater consciousness that's happening, particularly at this time now, which is I feel so privileged and honored to be alive to contribute some what I can, you know, put my grain of salt into there.
Yes,
I got one big question. That's right. My last big question for you.
Yeah,
it's the vibration and the pH level of natural water streams.
Yeah.
And the content that's mineral that's in it. I mean, you go to Glastonbury, you got the red well and the white well. So there's a great example of that. And people go to Lourdes and people go to different places of the world to get water. So when it comes to your farm or your land that you're going to get, do you actually go and test the water to see if it's salinity, it's acid, or it's alkaline? Or what do you do, and how do you go and remineralize it?
So, two examples. One is here in Sussex, where we're very acid, and we have very iron-rich water, and it's obvious. I don't even have to test it, and the soils are very acid. You see that through the plant cover. So instead of me doing soil tests, I look at I studied plant sociology. So I know the plant's preference to grow in different pH. So all my annual weeds and all my perennial weeds or wild herbs, flora, I know where they grow. They're soil indicators. We have whole lists of, indicating heavy soil, light soil, medium heavy soils, acid soil, medium acid, alkaline soils, well-drained, waterlogged soils. You've got different plant communities. So that's my soil analysis. It's usually asking people to go to a land and go, which are your weeds? And they will tell us what the soil is.
Oh, is that right?
I need a chemical test. Wrong answer.
Phenomenal.
Then, here, the water, you mentioned water, is rich in iron. It's very acid, very much curtailing growth. Laterite soils, you might have them also in Australia in the desert areas or jungle areas. Red soils rich in iron and aluminium. Yeah. The hardest soil to grow food plants. I had huge problems in Mexico to bring enough humus and enough what to do with slash and burn. Burning the trees creates the ash to alkalize the soil and bind iron and aluminium so it doesn't inhibit the plant growth. So, if you know a little bit basic chemistry, you don't need to do soil tests. You just go, oh, people used to do this for centuries here and it worked for them. And they figured it out just by trial and error. And you might be reiterating then just go, oh yeah, that makes sense. There's a lot of iron in the soil. We've got orange soils here, so they don't grow easily food crops. They're good for forestry. Okay, so to improve that soil, I have to do a lot of humus management, a lot of green manuring, a lot of applying lime or wood ash and burning, the material that's woody material in my fireplace, hopefully create some heat for my house, and then I have wood ash. And then the charcoal will help to create even more body in the soil, besides the humus to hold the moisture and the nutrients and the, all the goodness of the mycelium living in there and the microbiome. And then you have the other extreme. You go to Spain, where I live. I was on limestone, and the pH of the water was 9.5, which is caustic soda. So knowing that, I would add into the water and into my fields gypsum, sulfur. I had to do a chemical fertilizer to balance the pH. Instead of here liming, I had to use something that acidifies the soil. And there was gypsum, sulfur rich, which is acidifying, and digging a lot of green material into the ground with green manures, which as it breaks down, in that breakdown, it creates a lot of acidity, as acid as lemon juice. So if you know your chemical processes and biochemical processes of composting and of your chemistry in terms of acidity and alkalinity, you manage that. And, biodynamics is teaching the science and biochemistry and all that as much as the finer, sort of more spiritual aspects of farming and gardening.
Very brilliant. So we've got your school up here. That's Biodynamics. This one here. So people watching anywhere around the world, they can come onto this website of yours and yhlu.org, and you do online courses, yeah?
That's correct. At this moment, exclusively online courses. We're revamping the practical workshops to get more on people's land. If they want to, have us come to their land and teach them on their land, then we'd give the practical workshops there. And online, we basically have three options. Is the the full year course, which is more for intermediate advanced learners or wanting to really get into biodynamics in terms of health and regenerating the environment and themselves. That's a 76 session course that could be either just bought recorded and access to an interactive WhatsApp group, or live questions and answers that we're also doing together on a weekly basis for 38 weeks. And then we have 12 masterclasses for beginners. That is just happening. And we're also offering now until St. Nicholas. I don't know if that's something anybody knows here on the channel. 6th of December, Secret Santa. We're going to give people with a special offer 50% off on all the courses if they sign up before then. And we also do a WhatsApp forum on its own where people can come in with different interest groups, where we're also now working on the inner side of the meditative side of work and relationship to nature. When you think of all the traditional festivals, people go back to traditions that are, 5,000 years old, 10,000 years old, what have you, 2,000 years old with Christianity, or a bit less with Islam. We're looking at recreating festivals and celebrations that honor our relationship and dynamic interchange with nature, the cosmos, and ourselves and each other, and revamping the festivals out of, as it were, from scratch, doing like 3-4 day immersions where we explore in different ways of modalities of arts and artisanship and nature observation and stuff, recreating the festivals. So that's also coming up in the new year. If people are interested, more of an inner path to connecting again with nature.
Oh, very good.
Amazing. Well, it's been an absolute delight talking to you. It's been fascinating. I have been gripped with your stories and your sharings with us. And I can say that as we draw this to a close, that I have a profound sense of hope for the future when we trust in the providence of the unfathomable. How exquisite is that? Thank you. Thank you, Hans.
Get them back next year.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay, we'll find out what's up.
More practical suggestions, always open to that.
Bloody brilliant.
Yeah.
Mate.
And we're waiting for my mother's quince tree to see what's going to happen with that come springtime.
Yeah.
Marvelous. Right. Thank you very, very much, Hans. Amazing. It's really interesting.
And feel blessed to be in your presence. Thank you very much for being and spreading the good word and the hope and the dreams to make them come true.
Yeah, exactly right. Stay with us while we just finish off. Yeah.